Coming up, meet the 3 candidates running for president of the National Congress of American Indians. A decision will be made this week. Join us for those interviews plus headlines ahead on the ICT Newscast.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.
The ICT Newscast is sponsored by the Indian Land Tenure Foundation, a nonprofit organization serving American Indian nations and people in the recovery and control of their rightful homelands. On the web at iltf.org.
Support for the ICT Newscast with Aaliyah Chavez comes from the Arizona PBS studios in Phoenix at the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communications at Arizona State University. Humans are exploiting natural resources to the degree where we are reaching tipping points, risking irreversible damage to us and the planet, according to a new UN report. The study by the UN's think tank, the United Nations University, says we need to better manage the world's resources to avoid catastrophic impacts. Indeed, data from the last 12 months show temperatures that are the hottest ever recorded. A peer-reviewed report by the nonprofit Climate Central said burning gasoline, coal, natural gas, and other fossil fuels that release planet-warming gases like carbon dioxide caused the unnatural warming from November 2022 to October 2023. In September, Indian Collective called on the Biden administration to end the reliance on fossil fuels. And that is a complicated path for world governments. Jean Lahamacourt is an environmental advocate and a citizen of the Fort McKay First Nation.
What our Canadian leadership is doing is putting their blindfolders on and not really being accountable for what they have done, and yet they're portraying that Canada's environment friendly and all this, but this is the biggest source of the carbons here. Like, how can you say that?
Canada is among roughly 100 nations that have pledged by mid-century to reach zero emissions, or take as much greenhouse gas out of the atmosphere as it contributes. At last year's UN climate conference known as COP27, Canada also joined other rich nations to promise more money for developing countries to fight climate change. Yet, at that same conference, Canada brought the second largest delegation of fossil fuel executives of any country in the world, according to the Associated Press. The business of extraction mixed with the challenges of climate change. Well, and in this country, last week a federal judge upheld the Biden administration's approval of the massive Willow oil drilling project on Alaska's remote North Slope. U.S. District Judge Sharon Gleason rejected requests by grassroots Inupiat groups and environmentalists to reverse the approval of the project. It's within the National Petroleum Reserve, Alaska, and environmentalists say the president is backpedaling on his pledge to combat climate change. The company behind the project, ConocoPhillips Alaska, has the right to develop its leases in the reserve subject to reasonable restrictions and mitigation measures imposed by the federal government, the judge wrote. She added that the project is consistent with the policy objectives for the Petroleum Reserve. Environmental groups say the project will contribute to greenhouse gas emissions, and the groups could affect ice-reliant species such as the polar bear, Arctic ring seals, and bearded seals, which are already experiencing population declines because of climate change. Last winter, a hotel manager in South Dakota warned Native Americans to stay away from the property. Now, a consent decree from the U.S. Department of Justice has banned one of the hotel's owners from working, and she must publicly apologize for her actions. The federal agency announced the apology last week as part of the consent decree with the owners of Rapid City's Grand Gateway Hotel. Hotel co-owner Connie Uri, in March 2022, posted on social media that she would no longer allow American Indians on the property because of a fatal shooting at the hotel involving 2 teenagers who police said were Native American. Members of the indigenous-led Indian collective were denied hotel rooms shortly after Yur's post. But after months of boycotts and protests against the hotel and its owners, the Justice Department stepped in and sued, alleging racial discrimination against American Indians. Assistant Attorney Kristen Clark described the hotel's owner's behavior as hateful, saying it invokes a long and painful history of Native stereotypes against the exclusion of the Native American community. The hotel shut down for about a month because of the protests, and Yur was arrested May 31, 2022, accused of spraying a cleaning product at Indian collective demonstrators outside the hotel. As an Oklahoma Advisory Board on Indian Education enters its milestone year, it still faces unexpected hurdles. An 18-person advisory council is short 7 members as the anniversary of its establishment is approaching. The council was meant to make the quality of Native education and related services more accessible and visible. But the controversies surrounding the state review of the social studies curriculum and its section on Native history has left potential council members unsettled. There are now enough members to form a majority, but the council needs 2 additional votes in order to actually carry out its duties. Until last year, the governor appointed all of the board members. However, that power has been taken over by the state legislature because the governor left vacancies open sometimes for years. Now to Central Oregon, where a school serving Native American students is in hot water after its principal refused to acknowledge Indigenous Peoples Day. Casey Jackson, the principal at Siletz Valley School, received her 7th complaint for calling students who participated in a protest cowards. In early October, a group of young people walked out of the building after their school did not recognize Indigenous Peoples Day. It is located just outside of Siletz tribal lands, and nearly half of the student body is Indigenous. Jackson, who is both principal and superintendent, was formally investigated by the school board for the complaint. And those are the headlines for the ICT Newscast. A few years ago, ICT held a debate in Albuquerque with candidates for president of the National Congress of American Indians. When we asked one candidate if she wanted to join the debate, she said, "Of course, I'm running to be the president of Indian country." In many ways, that's still the case. Founded in 1944, the NCAI is the oldest and largest organization in the United States that advocates on behalf of tribal governments and communities. The NCAI is often the White House's first call on policy questions, and the President of the Congress testifies on every major piece of legislation, setting the tone for what's important for the nation's nearly 600 tribes, plus those globally. On Thursday, the Congress will elect a new president. 3 experienced Indigenous leaders are vying for the post. Cheryl Andrews Maltais, chairwoman of the Wampanoag tribe of Gayhead, Aquinnah, Mark Macaro, the chairman of the Pechanga Band of Indians, and Marshall Paree, the chairman and CEO of the Tunica Biloxi tribe of Louisiana. We invited them to introduce themselves and then asked each to answer 3 questions. Here in alphabetical order are their responses.
My name is Cheryl Andrews Maltais, and I'm the chairwoman of the Wampanoag tribe of Gayhead, Aquinnah. We're on the island of Nope, which most people know as Martha's Vineyard, and we're the people of the first light. I'm running for president of NCAI in order to serve Indian country to help heal our nations and build a better future for all of us.
Mayu, non Mark Mukara Yaka, Pinop Pechangawish. Greetings, my name is Mark Macaro, and I'm the tribal chairman of the Pechanga Band of Indians in Southern California. I'm honored and humbled to announce my candidacy for president of the National Congress of American Indians. I've had the privilege of serving my tribe as tribal chairman for the last 28 years, and I am in my 29th year as tribal chairman. And for the last 2 years, I've also had the privilege of serving you as first vice president of NCAI.
I'm Worship Rate Chairman, CEO of the Tunica Biloxi Tribe of Louisiana, Chairman of the Board of the Institute of Indian Development of Louisiana, as well as the Chairman of the Board of the Intertribal Council of Louisiana. I am married to Stephanie Briette Paris as well. And we have one daughter, Marcia Louise Paris, living in Marshall, Louisiana.
The National Congress of American Indians has lost a lot of its breath as more tribes opt out of membership. How would you bring them back into the Congress?
Well, first, I'd like to start with utilizing our regional vice presidents more. And by having them who are more familiar with their areas, reaching out and ascertaining exactly why tribes may not be participating, whether or not it's by choice because of a particular reason, whether it's financial, or whether they may not have even been invited to join NCAI, and reestablish that relationship or that connectivity to see how we are able to bring more of the tribes on to get a wider voice of Indian country, a more representative voice.
The membership has hit a low of 180 tribes as of about a year ago, and now it sits at about 209 at the end of September. And the 10-year high was 270. I would champion the creation of a fund for tribes who need economic help in paying these rather large registration fees. They may need assistance in traveling to get to the 3 meetings we have per year: the annual, the mid-year, and the Executive Council winter session. And I think if we do this, that will do tremendous help in bolstering our renewals and tribes joining anew.
Over the last 4 months, I traveled every region of Indian country, talking to members, current members of the National Congress of American Indians, as well as tribal leaders that decided not to participate or no longer members of NCAI. So my ultimate goal is to, if elected as president of National Congress of American Indians within the first 4 months, is to travel all of the regions of any country along with the respective vice president, not only talking to the current members of NCAI, but tribal leaders who have decided not to be part of NCAI or no longer want to serve as members of NCAI, and find why that they feel that their voices haven't been heard or why they're not taking part of it. And making sure that NCAI is have the environment for all tribes, because it's extremely important that everyone knows, as the oldest and largest Native American advocacy, there's room for everybody in this organization.
NCAI members will vote this week on a constitutional amendment that would limit the right of state-recognized tribes in the Congress. What are your views on this amendment?
Well, I think if we're the National Congress of American Indians, it should be as inclusive as possible, understanding that federally recognized tribes have a specific relationship with the United States, and our issues and with whom we speak, whether it's our congressional leadership or whether it's our federal partners, we have a different relationship, and negotiations with them are on a different level. And then we also have to be mindful that not all tribes want to or intend to be federally recognized, as well as some tribes may not be able to because of the documentation burden that is put upon them. So through no fault of their own, that they don't have that federal standing, but their voices are still very important to be heard because they have standing within their states and they're eligible to negotiate with their own states. So we want to make sure that those voices are heard, but also ensuring that, the conversations and the negotiations that we, on a government-to-government relationship with the United States, do not get diverted. But then we also have the reality of there are, individuals and or organizations that are established for intertribal standing that would have representatives or individual Indians from several different communities that make up an organization, and they are not necessarily a tribal government. So, there are different strata to the relationship, but as Native peoples and as Indian peoples, all of our voices need to be heard. I would prefer, if we could, at NCAI, is to move this discussion away from this particular meeting because it is such a important discussion that we need to have. And I think that we need to have a deliberate process through which we evaluate what is the intended goal by this action. And, making sure that we are all on the same page with what understanding what the long and short term impacts and implications will be, and maybe put a task force together representative of all of these different perspectives to really hash it out and have those difficult conversations, because they are hard conversations. So I'm hopeful that we can find a consensus.
Well, first of all, it's a matter of individual opinion that I'm about to express, but it'll be the collective will of the organization. That said, the constitutional amendment is something that's being proposed by a number of tribes, and I do know that dozens of tribal leaders across the country have expressed support for it because they've been frustrated with the rules as they stand right now. NCAI is a Congress. We're not a trade association per se. As a Congress, we're a deliberative body, deliberative political body advocating the collective interests of sovereign tribal nations to Congress, the administration, and the White House. In this circle of sovereigns, there is a rub when at least 24 state and non-federally recognized tribes sit in parity with sovereign federally recognized tribal nations. Federally recognized tribes are often parties to treaties. They have a right to self-govern. They create laws which are binding. And in other words, federally recognized tribes assert actual jurisdiction among other political subdivisions and political sovereigns. So state tribes and non-federally recognized tribes have none of these powers. They have a status in law that's really no different than a Kiwanis or a Rotary Club, and many, in fact, are social groups. And in this manner, dozens of tribal leaders, like I said, have complained that their sovereignty is diminished and that in this Congress of Sovereigns, for the state and non-federally recognized tribes to sit in parity has created a dynamic that allows our own sovereignty to be diluted. So the proposed constitutional amendment remedies that. It proposes that voting members of the Congress be federally recognized tribes as they appear on the annual published federal listing. And state-recognized, non-federally recognized tribes would be allowed to stay in the organization. They just wouldn't be able to vote. And there is a benefit to being able to stay in the organization as well. Access to the information in real time, access to the debates, participation in the debates and deliberations, just not the final vote.
I vehemently oppose both of these amendments, and the reason why, because back in the late 40s, our tribal leaders from Tunica-Biloxi tribe traveled to Washington, D.C. to advocate for federal recognition. And they was turned away after a 3-month travel gap, told there wasn't a tribe. And they came home feeling very bad, alone. And over the years, we got in contact with NCAI. They played an integral role in securing the federal recognition of Tunica-Biloxi tribe. And the NCAI also played an integral part in advocating for tribes to get federal recognition. So I do think that Indian country is stronger together collectively. We need a united Indian country, not a divided Indian country.
What would be your priorities if elected president of NCAI?
There's so many things that are, important in Indian country that narrowing it down to just 1 or 2 was difficult, and 5 was challenging as well. But basically, as I said, helping to heal our tribal communities and build a better future. Starting with our relationships and, NCAI's domestic advocacy and reinforcing that and utilizing the strength, the wisdom, and the skill sets of the regional vice presidencies, with vice presidents, as well as the previous leadership, because they're experts in the field. We don't often tap those resources as much as we should. Also, rebuilding intertribal relationships, because as we know, particularly with this vote that's coming up, we have a real problem in Indian country with intertribal relationships, as well as our government-to-government relationship with the United States. Addressing our historic and our current trauma from the contact time to today, the boarding school era and the issues, missing and murdered Indigenous peoples, and the scourge that is the substance abuse and suicide prevention that we really need to spend a lot of time and energy on. Fighting for our sovereignty, holding the United States accountable and upholding their trust and treaty obligations, protecting our lands, waters, natural resources, and sacred sites, and advocating for corrected legislation, like Senator Warren and Congressman Kilmer's Honoring Promises to Native Nation Acts, which encapsulates the mandatory funding and advanced funding for all of Indian country in our programs, getting it out of discretionary funding. The Kateri Fix and monitoring other congressional activities, honoring the work of previous leaders, and building for our future and re-envisioning our relationship with the United States and how we receive our funding, going to almost a Marshall Plan for Indian country, and changing the way we do business because we are simply not their wards.
The top priority is the protection and advancement of tribal sovereignty. Over the last year or so, Indian country was able to dodge a significant potential taking in terms of the Brackeen case. But they're going to keep coming at us. They're going to keep coming at Indian country. They're going to keep using equal protection laws to undermine tribal sovereignty as if we are a bunch of racial groups, and we're not. We are political sovereigns, and we need to always be ready. We need to maintain that strength and project it forward and make sure all members of Congress and the administration understand the underpinnings of tribal sovereignty. You know, law enforcement in Indian country right now is a huge problem. There's been lots of discussion about missing and murdered Indigenous relatives. Every missing and murdered Indigenous relative begins as a law enforcement case. And the fact is that in Indian country, there is a lack of adequate funding and resources, especially amongst our large land-based tribes. And there just is not an ability to have some of the basic policing powers and efficacy. And so, you know, we need more boots on the ground. There needs to be more resources. I mean, the investigation resources are abysmal. And that's not the tribe's fault. It's a lack of funding and a lack of vision from the federal government. So I would convene a summit of law enforcement experts in Indian country to figure out some short-term solutions as well as how we get through the next 10 and 20 years so that when a missing and murdered Indigenous person case happens, we have resources to deal with it within the first 24 and 48 hours, which is absolutely critical.
My priorities will be is to ensure that we be more inclusive to each and every one. When you talk about protecting and preserving tribal sovereignty, in the same breath, you have to be talking about protecting Native women and girls. You also have to be talking about empowering our youth. We are at a place in our life where I do think of a time has come, our season is upon us, where Indian country can be the solution to American problems. But we need a more robust, bigger, better Indian country to be that clearinghouse, so to speak, or that library of information for all tribes, to make sure that any issue that is in the country is facing or in the tribes is facing, that they can call and rely upon NCAI. You also have to be talking about opioid fentanyl, nearly losing our children. We at a rapid pace, and that's why we need a more united in the country to do more outreach, not only to our youth, but also to our veterans. When the veterans return home, they have to feel that they have a community waiting for them. And we have to advocate on their behalf as well. And again, a more united Indian country and a more robust NCAI give us that ability to advocate at every level of government for each and every tribal citizen and each and every tribal nation or tribal village. Again, we are stronger together.
The vote takes place Thursday at the National Congress of American Indians annual convention in New Orleans. Look for the results at ictnews.org. ICT invites you to be part of something special. Each week, we're taking on a different topic important to Indigenous people, and you, our viewers and readers. Find the link at ictnews.org to sign up for the e-weekly newsletter. It's emailed on Thursdays, and we're covering food, business, economic development, and arts and culture. And for December, we're working on a very special holiday edition on the web at ictnews.org. I'm Mark Trahant. Thank you for joining us, and that's a slice of our Indigenous world. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.